Hey, yo, I want to talk about the Netflix Magic the Gathering animated series. And in brief, for those that don't know, way back in 2019, Netflix announced it would be teaming up with Marvel's Winter Soldier and Endgame directors, and Community alums, the Russo brothers, to produce an animated Magic the Gathering series for the streaming platform. But in 2021, it was reported that Jeff Klein would be stepping in to take over from the Russos after they departed the project over creative differences. Uh-oh, that wasn't a good sign, especially given Netflix's tendency to greenlight basically any project and then axe them on a whim, regardless of how much watching them made me cry. Then, more news earlier this year, which is 2024 if you're watching from the future. Look how thin I used to be. Sorry about that live-action nudity, by the way. This channel really went off the rails. Anyway, it was reported that Netflix had quietly cancelled the project and hoped we wouldn't notice. This was discovered after reporters spoke to actor Brendan Ralph, who was apparently set to voice Gideon in the upcoming show. This may be how you best know Ralph, but if not, you may better know him as this. However, to me, he will of course always be this. It's milk and eggs, bitch. Ralph had spoken to a reporter for Collider and said that he knew the show wasn't happening and that it was, quote, kind of old news. And it was at this point that I decided to cover the topic and make this video. However, the direction I was going in had to change mid-production because breaking news, and by breaking I mean Christ, probably like 2 months ago by the time this video is released. But it's not dead. Terry Matalas is taking over as showrunner who... I watched Picard, man, and I enjoyed that third season more than the garbage fire that was the first two. And I do think him being at the helm is a major reason for it, but at least better than terrible isn't exactly the same as being good, so he's still got some proving to do in my eyes before I'm genuinely excited about this upcoming show. But regardless of my opinion, it's not cancelled, it's still happening, and that's where we're at in terms of news on the animated Magic the Gathering series for Netflix. And though it is good to see it be renewed, the show isn't out yet. Their wording of now in production is a bit vague as to exactly what that means. And the teaser image only features Chandra and Ajani, not Brendan Ralph's character Gideon, which makes me wonder if he's not going to feature anymore. Are they scrapping everything that was previously worked on and starting again from scratch? I mean, as Deadline reported in 2021, it wasn't just the Russos that left when Jeff Klein stepped in, but the entire creative team was replaced. Has that happened again with Terry Matalas? I wouldn't be surprised, as it's not like Netflix are strangers to the ideas of bidding off all their previous work and starting again from square one. Again, it's happening is cute, but it's also the third time Netflix have told us that, so don't cross your fingers because it hasn't happened yet and still might not. Which leads me back to this video. Why do Magic tie-ins fail? That's the initial question I had when I first heard the reports that the show had been cancelled earlier this year. But even with the news that the show isn't cancelled, the question remains relevant. Because this is a mess. This feels so much like hard work. Look at how many articles I had to reference just to show the chronology of the story around whether the show is happening or not. Why is it like this? Other IPs similar to Magic don't have this issue, and that's what I want to talk about in this two-part special. In this episode, I want to compare Magic's tie-in shows, films, books, and video games to that of 3 of Magic's contemporaries. Think about how they do it, and more importantly, the cultural impact they have because of it. I want to talk about the zeitgeist, our collective understanding of an intellectual property. And to do that, well, I know I sometimes joke about being lazy and not doing a lot of research for these videos, but this time I mean it. I run this channel full-time, and while I'm not claiming to be the font of all knowledge around everything Magic the Gathering, I will certainly know more than the average everyday person. And it's the average everyday person that's most relevant to this conversation because they're the ones most likely to be brought into an IP after seeing a tie-in product. Arcane here being a prime example which spiked interest in League of Legends. So, I'm not going to do any more research for this, and I'm going to do this off the top of my head because if it turns out that there are actually loads of Magic the Gathering movies, for instance, but I, as an enfranchised player, have never heard of them because WotC don't promote or market them, then I imagine your average everyday person won't have heard of them either, and in terms of the zeitgeist, that will mean they've had no cultural impact. A show that no one watches because no one knows about it is as good as a show that doesn't exist in the first place. So, that's this episode, the first of the two-parter. For the second part, I'm going to come up with a list of show, film, book, and video game ideas that I think would work really well as tie-ins using Magic the Gathering's setting, characters, lore, and gameplay mechanics to demonstrate how much better we could have it. D&D gets cartoons, movies, and games, and so the second half of this two-parter will be me proving that Magic can have those things too. And if that sounds of interest to you, please come support me on Patreon. You can gain access to early audio-only versions of all of my videos, including that one, which you can listen to as a podcast. Plus, read my monthly behind-the-scenes blog which keeps you updated on what I'm working on. You can get a vote in our community opinion polls where we discuss interesting aspects of the game, as well as a whole bunch of additional fun perks, most of which will include the option to have your name credited on screen at the end of my videos. I have many tiers with many rewards, the cheapest of which starts at only £1, which seems to be about $1.50. But there is a catch with that low cost though, because that Lunar tier is limited to only the first 1,000 people. So if you'd like to see your name credited on screen, you want to help support me to keep making videos like this, and £1 or $1.50 doesn't break the bank, then come join me on the Moonbase and check out my Patreon, link in the description below. So, Magic the Gathering tie-ins. And again, off the top of my head we have Arena, I guess, which is a video game technically, but I actually feel like it would be more accurate to call it the digital version of the same game, so I'm not going to count it. Magic Online and anything from the Jewels of the Planeswalker series also aren't going to count in my eyes, as a true tie-in needs to be transformative, either in medium or product. All three of these are just Magic again, only on a computer rather than on cardboard. And because of that, perhaps controversially, I'm also not going to include Magic's story. Because Magic as an IP isn't just the cards, but it's the narrative that goes along with them. When Netflix make their animated show, it'll be the lore they're adapting, not the printing and packaging method of boosters for instance, and that lore is given to us via these official online story blog posts, so yeah, those are just part of the game. They come out in time with the latest sets and explain what's being depicted on the cards. It's symbiotic, as both the story and the card game together is what makes up the Magic IP, and if something is an integral part of that IP, then it's not a tie-in, it's just the product itself. The same is true for the official novels that used to come as part of the bundles, because the story didn't always used to be online, it used to come in book form. And so, are these books tie-ins? I'd say no, because like the story posts now, they were official parts of the game that got released in conjunction with the sets that the books were about, or, like I said, they came in bundled together with the game. However, this book, Brandon Sanderson's Children of the Nameless, does count as a tie-in because as far as I'm aware, it was just released as a book, to be enjoyed on its own and not as one aspect of an overall set release. In fact, it's only recently that we've started to see some of the characters from the book even make an appearance in the game. Are there other books that would count as tie-ins by this metric? Probably, but can I name them? Not off the top of my head right now, so no. As for TV shows and films that have been released, there's basically nothing. I always appreciated these animated trailers for sets, but they're just promotional material and not meant to be enjoyed on their own. And the same is true for this absolutely fantastic live-action video depicting a battle between Chandra and Tamio, which, while very good, I'm pretty certain is just an advert, most likely paid for by WotC. But even if it wasn't, it would still only count as a fan work or a cosplay, and not an official tie-in. For actual recent video games that aren't just digital clients, I can think of two. Magic Legends, a Diablo-style deck builder MMO created by Cryptic Studios that I think I played the beta for, where you design your own planeswalker and then run dungeons with your friends. Cool idea, but bogged down by microtransactions if I remember. And Mana Strike, which I also played early on and I think was a tower defense, where you play as a pre-established planeswalker and summon monsters in waves to attack your opponent who's doing the same to you. And that's it. Obviously there's merchandise too, but you know, buying a t-shirt with the Planeswalker logo on it isn't the same as watching a movie. So as far as I'm aware, these three projects are all there are in terms of modern Magic the Gathering tie-ins. But Mana Strike got cancelled and taken offline. Magic Legends got cancelled after the beta and never made it to release. And Children of the Nameless has a whole other story behind it, but suffice it to say, as far as I'm aware, it never got a physical print and I believe can't be read online through official channels anymore either. So this is a bit pathetic. Outside of the card game, there's not really any avenues for your average person to become interested in Magic's IP. The story doesn't matter as much if all they're doing is trying to sell cards, and it seems they're focused on that and nothing else. Maybe that explains why we've seen such a reduction in the emphasis put onto the narrative lately, and why new players are being courted via Universes Beyond, made up of IPs they're already familiar with. So, let's compare. The first of the three contemporaries to Magic that I want to look at is Yu-Gi-Oh! An IP that, as you're about to see, I know nothing about. However, I can still name, Scarlet, bring these up on screen if I'm right, Blue Eyes White Dragon, and Dark Magician? Okay. And there's like a Dark Magician girl as well, I think? Okay. And outside of an excellent meme teaching me the name Pot of Greed, I'm familiar enough with those names to be able to recite them off the top of my head because in terms of tie-ins, Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a cartoon. It doesn't even matter that I never watched it. I learned about it through cultural osmosis as my friends watched it and they told me it was cool. That alone has meant I've always been interested in maybe getting into the game. I mean, the cards put me off a bit. Christ, look at all that text. But regardless, a cartoon is such a powerful tie-in tool to ingrain an IP into the public consciousness that however many years on, I'd still be interested in giving it a go and maybe checking it out. Magic could learn a thing or two because that's how it worked for He-Man, Transformers and Ghostbusters. You show child me an awesome cartoon and I want to own the physical products. You cannot tell me that that Ecto-1 toy isn't cool. And speaking of Yu-Gi-Oh toys, I know I said merchandise like t-shirts don't count, but I think this thing does. Branded clothing is one thing, because most people are going to be wearing clothing regardless, but no one's going to pick up one of these weird arm blade things unless they were specifically interested in Yu-Gi-Oh! And again, I don't play, I don't know what that is, but I want one because it looks sick. Very nerdy, but a lot of fun, and it makes me want to get one so I can have fun with it too. Which in turn means I'd need to get into playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Something I'm now more open to if I get to activate whatever the hell that thing is. The second of our 3 comparisons is Warhammer. It's not a card game, but as a hobby it shares the same sort of space, it has a lot of crossover in terms of audience, and it shares something in common with Magic in that its creator, Games Workshop, like WotC, are also seemingly having trouble getting their show off the ground. But WotC could still learn a thing from Games Workshop in terms of tie-ins because even without the show, Warhammer still has books. And not just a handful, but an entire black library in fact. And not just books that are basically advertisements for the latest set, but as far as I'm aware, ones that span the entire history of that universe, set during different eras and exploring all aspects of the lore. And the lore isn't just posted online, hidden away in short-form blogs you wouldn't know existed unless you searched for them, because Warhammer books are released as novels and available from stores and places like Amazon and Audible. And they're able to do that because the books are, it seems, well written, and the lore is interesting enough that even the people that don't play with the miniatures still want to read them. There's no reason you couldn't say the same thing about current Magic lore if it was given a bit more love. Warhammer also has video games. There's lots of them, but I feel like Space Marine 2 is a good representation to get the point across. According to this tweet by games industry biz editor Christopher Dring, Space Marine 2 is already the second biggest new game this year in Europe after just 2 weeks. Do you think that everyone that plays that video game already plays the tabletop? Of course not, but I bet a bunch of people will now be more likely to after having played this video game. Hell, I'd bet the Total War Warhammer series success is one of the main reasons Games Workshop thought the old world should be something they should relaunch. And they were correct, it is. Show me models for the Vampire Coast and I will buy them. I don't play Warhammer, but I still want one of those big necrophaxes. And you can't tell me that WotC aren't aware of this sort of business crossover. They did a tie-in with Warhammer themselves. Why the hell is this only one way? Why aren't the little playable Jason Vraska models in the tabletop game? Why aren't Liliana and Sorin unlockable reskins for Vlad and Kemler of the Vampire Counts in Total War? I feel like the Phyrexians would be right at home in Space Marine. Tell me I'm wrong. And finally, our last of the comparisons is, of course, Pokemon. And I'm not going to bore you because you already know what Pokemon is, but I will point out that while Pokemon may have started as a manga or whatever, and then had a game, true Pokemania didn't sweep the planet until the 1-2 punch that was the release of the TCG and the anime. From personal experience, all of these things fed into each other. The first I learned what Pokemon was when I saw everyone I knew suddenly had the cards, and I thought they were cool. It made me want to watch the cartoon, which in turn made me want to play the video games, which in turn made me want to get more cards. Where is that cycle for Magic the Gathering? Which is, I would like to remind you, also a game about summoning collectible monsters to battle them. So, what's my point? Why bring this up or say any of this? It's because I want to reframe the discussion. As Magic players, we're actually very lucky. We have a lot of communication with WotC, and they're pretty transparent in terms of the game and the business decisions they're making behind the scenes. Especially when compared to other companies in the same space. Or at least from what I understand. But I think as a company, WotC have been failing one of my favourite aspects of the game for a long time. The lore. And seemingly they're doing it to try and increase profits. But I don't think it needs to be that way. In fact, when you look at other companies, WotC are pretty much alone in that outlook, as everyone else branches from their core products to books, to games and toys, to video games, to TV shows, and all of that helps generate interest in their IP, which brings in new people who will spend money. Magic the Gathering is a game, Pokemon is a franchise. So yeah, the Netflix show isn't cancelled. Whoopee. But is that really as good as it can get? I don't think so. And so the aim of this video is to point that out to the player base so that hopefully we can collectively let WotC know it. Like I said, they're in pretty good communication with us, so I'd like for us to all feed back that if money is the focus, then the lore should be the focus. Because better lore will result in better tie-in media, which, yeah, is better for the existing players, but will also attract new ones bringing in more money, which is better for WotC. So hey, Watsy, give us this animated TV show, but give us a live action one too. Give us blockbuster movies. Give us books, full actual novels. Give us video games. And then, as a company, you won't have to rely on Universes Beyond to bring in new players, because new players will want to come to you for the Magic IP itself. Everyone wins. I like to think these examples prove that. And if you'd like to see some more examples of what I think would make for some cool Magic books, films and video games, then check out the second half of this 2-part episode that will be coming soon, so make sure to like and subscribe. Will that be next week? Hang on. There we go. Magic 8-Ball. When will the second part of this 2-parter be out? It says, get a real job. Oh. Thank you very much for watching this video, and thank you to everyone that supports me, like James Diamond, Eggboy the Particle that permeates all existence, and the rest of my patrons whose names are on screen now. I'd also like to thank the sponsor for this video, me and my Patreon page, where you can get your name credited on screen too. Check it out in the link in the description below. Hit the like button, leave a comment, install an ad block, most importantly subscribe and share this video with a friend. Hit the notification bell and do all those things the algorithm loves. If you agree or disagree with any of my points, or you want to see me do a video on another subject, let me know and I will see you next time. It's not a card game, but as a hobby it occupies the same sort of space, has a lot of crossover in terms of audience, and it shares something in common with Watsy in that Games Workshop are also seemingly having trouble getting their show off the ground.